point, or is this just a temporary eruption, a setback?
Well, I think there are a lot of people worried about Iraq, and more so than we might have thought even 6 months ago. The sectarian violence, the rivalries among the Kurd, Shia, and Sunni groups, the inability of the government to reach, Shia-dominated government to reach out to the Sunni population, and now seemingly, Andrea, orchestrated car bombings over the last 24 hours and tremendous bloody carnage in the streets of Baghdad. It's very disappointing to see, and one can only conclude that Iraq's going to be prone to violence for some time to come.
And Iran finally continuing saber-rattling, some would say, the tightening of the sanctions, threats from Iran. But is the bottom line here that Iran is going to go back to the negotiating table, and that Prime Minister Netanyahu will be sitting down with the president in 2 weeks? Or do you think something more serious, more ominous is about to happen?
There's always the risk and possibility of some kind of a conflict, particularly in the Gulf, where the Iranian and American navies are very close to each other. But I think that you're going to see a return to negotiations. Iran is under tremendous pressure, the toughest sanctions yet by the European Union and the United States. There's a lot of political pressure on the Iranians to at least find their way to the negotiating table. That's obviously the desire of the Obama administration, quite rightly, and the European Union, to see if diplomacy might be at least part of the answer to resolving this problem. So I think that there's a chances are reasonably good that we will see negotiations in the next several months regarding Iran's nuclear future.
Nicholas Burns, thank you very much.
Thanks,
and
Andrea.
the U.S., Europe, and Arab nations are now moving quickly to demand a ceasefire in Syria, where the government's relentless attacks on civilians have placed that country on the brink of civil war. NBC's chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel has more on the scale of destruction inside Syria.
For the last several weeks, all of Homs has been surrounded by Syrian government forces. They have been shelling the city from the outside, but the opposition does control a few pockets within the city, and this media center was in one of those pockets. It was one of the only places that had limited internet access. The journalists were in this media center this morning when it was destroyed by a rocket apparently fired by government troops posted around the city.
And of course, we had the incredible death of Marie Colvin and others only yesterday. At the same time, today in London, Hillary Clinton suggested that the time for Bashar Assad may be coming to an end.
It is clear to me that there will be a breaking point. I wish it would be sooner so that more lives would be saved than later, but I have absolutely no doubt there will be such a breaking point.
Former Congresswoman Jane Harman is president of the Wilson Center and joins me now. Jane, it just seems as though all the rhetoric is not going to get us anywhere. As hard as Hillary Clinton tries in her meetings with the Prime Minister Cameron today, as long as Russia and China, following Russia's lead, are not willing to join in the pressure against Bashar al-Assad.
Well, first of all, I hope Richard Engel is staying safe. It is just tragic to see the press that is bringing us the stories, those out in the field, lose their own lives. So I would say that as a frequent viewer of his reports. As for this, I'm less optimistic than Nick Burns. There will be a Friends of Syria meeting in Tunis tomorrow. It's significant that Tunis is the place. Let's understand that Algeria has had a peaceful revolution here and elected a government that is actually functioning. So Hillary Clinton is going there, and I applaud her, along with 70 other nations. That is an opportunity, one would hope, to put more pressure on the Bashar government. I think she's right that he has to go. His government is about to be named as war criminals by the United Nations. I just want to put up there a thought, and that is, let's look at the success of the transition in Yemen, which 6 months ago I said was the most dangerous place on earth. Saleh, the longtime 40-year autocrat who had ruled the place in a totally vicious way, is now out of there. He's been granted personal immunity, but his vice president has been elected, albeit in a plebiscite earlier this week in a fair election, and the violence has subsided, and certainly we, the U.S., are able, through whatever means, to try to reduce the al-Qaeda presence in the boonies in Yemen. I mean, maybe there's an example there for Syria. Maybe there's a slight window, not just to declare a ceasefire, which is a good thing and humanitarian access for humanitarian aid, but to find an end game. And the end game, it seems to me, should be the departure of Bashar, and the somehow the creation of a functioning unity government, which might even include Alawites, Bashar's tribe. But one of the good things about that, should that happen, is if we can break Syria away from Iran, that puts additional pressure on Iran, in addition to sanctions, which are succeeding. We should give success a chance in Iran, to force the government in Iran to abandon its nuclear policy. And so I see some optimism, but we have to keep the potential use of military force on the table. David Ignatius, someone I read carefully in the Washington Post, has a piece today where he says the only time the Iranian government has ever agreed to do anything is when the possibility of military force was very, very close.
Jane Harman, thank you very much.